Teachers, when did you realize a parent might be dumber than their kid? Story 1. During a parent-teacher conference, I was going over a girl who struggles in chemistry. She wasn't doing well, but I was ready to suggest ways she could improve. Her mom stopped me mid-sentence and said, "She doesn't have to be smart, she has to be pretty. She'll find a rich man, marry him, and never use chemistry again." The sad part, she wasn't particularly smart or pretty, so there went plan A. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I used to teach in an old, impoverished town. One day, I suggested to a student's father that his son should read more. He had a real knack for literature, and I thought some poetry might help spark his interest. The father cut me off immediately and said, "I am not letting him read poetry. That stuff will make him gay." I wish I was exaggerating. Story 3. Here's my favorite dumb parent story with a happy ending. A kid forges his dad's signature on a failed test. Pretty obvious forgery. The teacher calls him out, but when the dad comes in, he insists it is his signature. After all, his little prince can't get in trouble. About 2 weeks later, the dad storms into school, outraged that he hasn't been informed about the big project that's causing his son so much stress. "But you were informed," says the teacher. "Here's the slip I sent home for all the parents. That's your signature, right?" "Right," says Dad. Story 4. I was a 22-year-old Asian middle school teacher in a district that was 99% black. You couldn't find another person who looked like me within a 20-mile radius. One parent actually told me that I couldn't possibly be a good influence on her child. After all, I apparently do skanky things like getting my nails and hair done in my off hours. Story 6. My wife is an elementary school teacher and suspected that one of her students might be autistic. The child struggled to communicate, had bathroom-related difficulties, and showed several other classic signs of autism. During a conference, my wife gently explained that she thought it would be a good idea for him to be evaluated. The mother, however, refused, and even insisted that if her son did have autism, it was my wife who caused it. Story 7. I am not a teacher, but I coach my kids' youth sports teams. Once, a dad actually tried to bribe me, offering $50 to keep a certain kid from playing in our upcoming flag football game. These were 6-year-olds. Sure, the kid had made a costly mistake in the previous game, but the fact that a random dad was willing to pay me to bench a child completely blew my mind. Just to be clear, I did not accept the money. The dad tried to bribe me, and I turned him down for obvious reasons. Story 8. My SO is 23 and just recently started working as a high school English teacher. He's teaching summer school right now, and a parent actually asked if he could stop dressing so well or if there was an older teacher available because their daughter won't stop talking about how handsome her teacher is. Story 9. Had a student and her parent try to get me fired over a minor grading issue. They didn't just email me, they sent it to the principal, the Board of Education, and Barack Obama. Yes, the actual former president. The wild part, the grading wasn't even done by name, it was by student ID number. Even if I had wanted to treat her unfairly, I didn't. It literally wasn't possible. Edit. The student was half black, which I am guessing is why they thought this was a discrimination thing. But emailing Obama over a high school essay grade? That was a new one for me. Story 10. Parent of a high school freshman. My son is struggling so much. Can you send home a copy of the test ahead of time so he can prepare? But my favorite from a different mom, also of a high school freshman. Can you, yes you, the teacher with 130 students every day, make sure he puts his homework in his homework folder every day? I want him to be more organized, but I just don't have the time. I have 5 kids. Story 11. I was having a meeting with the parents of a 6th grader who had been causing chaos, throwing chairs, hitting other kids, constant outbursts. I laid out the incidents, trying to figure out a plan to help him. The mom, with a completely serious face, says, "Yes, my child is misbehaving, but you scrunched up his paper airplane in 2nd grade. This is really your own doing. I think the best thing to do is for you to help him make a new paper airplane and apologize. Then I am sure he'll behave." This kid was in 6th grade. Story 12. Back when I was student teaching, I got an email from a parent about their daughter's grade. She was failing, clear as day, an F, missing assignments, poor test scores, the works. The email said, and I quote, "Just give her a C." No reasoning, no discussion about extra credit, missing work, or how to help her improve. Just a demand. Sock. Now, I remember staring at the screen thinking, this is how some parents think school works, like it's a vending machine for grades and they just press the C button. Story 13. One of my fifth graders had been flashing gang signs, drawing gang symbols, and bragging about dealing drugs. I showed his mom one of his many drawings of gang symbols. She was pissed and asked if she could see the drawing and a pencil. When I gave them to her, she began editing the drawing and said, "That kid didn't even draw it right." It turned out she was the one who had initiated her son into the gang. Story 14. I once had to deal with a student who kept making inappropriate sexual comments towards me. After a few incidents, I started keeping him back after class to talk about his behavior, trying to set him straight, explain why it was unacceptable, and hopefully get him to stop. His parents got involved. And their conclusion? Clearly, he's saying those things because you're enticing him with flirtatious private meetings. They were referring to the disciplinary talks. I actually blurted out, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Not my proudest moment professionally, but at that point, I couldn't believe I was being accused of causing the behavior I was actively trying to stop. Story 15. My daughter's senior class voted a medically handicapped girl prom queen. At first, I feared they were playing a joke on her, but my daughter insisted that everyone truly wanted her to win. Her family was poor, and the teachers even chipped in to buy her dress, shoes, and everything she needed. The summer after graduation, I ran into the mother of another student in the class. This mother had always pushed her daughter to be popular, buying her the best of everything, pushing her into cheerleading, and even trying to set her up with boys in class. She would chase the boys on her daughter's behalf. She's a bit intense, so I usually try to avoid her if I see her first. That day, I wasn't so lucky. Immediately, she started complaining about the student who had been voted prom queen. She insisted her daughter should have won, that the other students had only voted for the other girl out of spite, and that it was unfair. Then she added that it was horrible to vote for a girl in special ed, that she didn't deserve to graduate, and that the teachers shouldn't have had to buy her dress as if being poor were a crime. I finally had enough. I told her what I thought, that it was a very nice thing for the students to do, that this might be the only special moment this girl would ever have, and that her daughter would have plenty of special moments in her life. I mentioned how wonderful it was that the teachers made sure she looked just as nice as the other girls. She was stunned. She had expected me to agree with her, but I was tired of her behavior, how she nearly forced her daughter into every social situation, told her friends about her daughter's intimate life, and went on crazy tirades every time we ran into each other. Now, when I see her in our small town, she just speaks and moves on. Thank goodness. Story 16. My aunt is a middle school teacher, so I've heard a lot of wild stories. At one point, the school was lucky enough to get a former Olympian as the head track and field coach. At a meet, he was helping a female student get a proper starting stance, positioning her feet correctly. A parent, unrelated to the student, saw him touching her feet and ankles and reported him for essay. Even the student herself was shocked by the accusation and fully backed the coach, but he was immediately fired and barred from ever working in the district again. Story 17. Not a teacher, but a student here. I will admit that maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved, but there was a boy in my class who I was really worried about. He didn't do any schoolwork, literally never did anything. He was obviously clever and genuinely nice, so I was concerned. One day, as school was letting out, I saw his mom in the parking lot. I talked to her for a few moments and decided to throw caution to the wind and share my concerns. "Look, Mrs. Name, please don't tell him I told you, but kid isn't doing any of his schoolwork. Like literally none. I am really concerned about him." The mom smiled at me, patted me on the head, and said, "Oh, it's okay. He has ADHD." I was too stunned to do anything but nod and walk away. We were 16. Story 18. I had a student tell her parents that I was picking on her because I tossed her a piece of candy and it hit her on the forehead. When it happened, I apologized, and she said it was fine. For context, before I tossed it, I asked her to come get the candy, and she said just toss it. She wasn't far away, maybe a few feet. Anyway, her parents came in, called me every name in the book, and honestly, I couldn't care less. What really got me fired up was when they accused me of being racist for picking on their daughter because she's Mexican. I looked at them and said, Are you serious? Is this some sort of joke? The mom replied, Absolutely not. I can tell you're racist just by looking at you. I calmly responded, I don't know if you noticed, but I am Mexican. Story 19. I teach math at an inner-city middle school. I once had a parent tell me that I need to treat her with respect because she had a master's degree in typing and was not your typical trap bish. Needless to say, she was the typical trap bish. Story 20. This family was incredibly well off. The little girl came to school in Matilda Jane clothing every single day. Those outfits run $40–60 a piece, and she almost never wore the same thing twice. Now compare her to a little boy in my class. His dad was in and out of jail. He always showed up in dirty jeans and the same pair of worn boots, and his mom cut his hair, and you could tell, but he was full of personality. All the kids loved playing with him. He could get a little rowdy at times and would say things like, "That's badass," or "What the hell?" but nothing that made me think of him as a behaviorally challenged kid. One day, the wealthy mother approached my lead teacher and flat out demanded that her daughter never have contact with this boy, claiming he was a bad influence. She didn't want her sitting next to him, talking to him, or even playing near him. When we refused, she gave her daughter the instructions directly. After that, the little girl would walk right up to the boy in front of everyone and announce, "You have to leave here so I can play." People never ceased to piss me off. Story 21. I was at a parents' evening a few years back, talking with the parents of two students, brother and sister. The girl was a quiet, hard-working student, not the loudest in class, but always tried her best. The parents sat down, and before I could even start, the mom waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh, don't worry about my daughter. She's thick. She only needs to learn how to cook and clean." I was completely floored. This girl had been doing fine in class, better than fine, actually. But the mother didn't care. Her entire focus shifted to the son. So how is my boy doing? Story 22. When I was in high school, my mom called me a "or" in front of my friends. She saw that I had a hickey and sighed, saying, "My daughter, the or." She actually trailed off at the end like she was saying, "Well, those are just the facts of life." The funny part, I hadn't done the deed yet, even though almost all my friends had. And this came from a woman who had been engaged twice in high school, married 3 times, engaged 4 times, cheated on my amazing and loving dad with the woman she was training to replace her at work while on maternity leave. She was pregnant with twins at the time, and who loved to tell me stories about her and my dad having intimate time in public. Story 23. Parents' evening last year. Year 10, so the students were around 14–15 years old. I told one mother that her son was doing really well in English and that he was very bright. She actually scoffed and said, "Really? Right in front of him?" I asked the boy what he was thinking of doing when he left school, and he said he wanted to go to college to take A-levels. At this school, most kids had incredibly low aspirations, so hearing that was music to my ears. But before he could get another word out, his mother cut in. No, you're doing an apprenticeship. You're going to be a plasterer like your dad." Now, I have absolutely no issue with kids taking the vocational route over the academic one. But this boy wanted to aim higher. He had the ability and the drive. His mom, though, made it clear in that moment that she didn't believe in him, that there was no point in even trying. And you could see his confidence drop right then and there. It was heartbreaking. Edit. A few people have messaged me saying it sounded like I was dismissing vocational careers. That's not what I meant at all. Sorry if I phrased it poorly. My point was that this particular student wanted to go to college and take his A-levels, but his mother basically told him he wasn't bright enough and shut the idea down. I absolutely believe vocational paths are valuable. My fiancé, for example, left school at 16, worked in a shop, and now drives lorries. He earns $10K more than I do as a teacher. So I definitely don't think everyone needs to go into higher education. I just believe people should have the chance to follow their own goals, whether academic or vocational, and not have that choice dismissed by someone else. That's honestly heartbreaking. It's not about whether you choose university or a trade. Both are valuable. What matters is letting kids follow their own dreams instead of shutting them down. Story 24. I had a star athlete who was being recruited by Ivy League schools, but he was failing my English class. On top of his general poor performance, I caught him cheating on a homework assignment, which he vehemently denied. His mom scheduled a meeting with an administrator and proceeded to berate me, accusing me of discriminating against student athletes. I was the pep club sponsor at the time. Then she insisted her son would never cheat. I pulled out his homework and read one of his answers aloud. As a 16-year-old girl. At this point, Mom completely lost it. She started yelling at him. "You can even cheat, right? What's wrong with you? How are you going to get into college if you can cheat?" Story 25. The mother emailed me something like, "My child has been coming home saying she has no homework in your class. I believe she should be having homework from your class every day. Can you please give her some homework?" There was homework. The kid simply was not turning in any of it that quarter. All the zeros were reflected in the online grade report, which apparently the parent refused to look at. Story 26. Every single adult should know where every single child is on campus at all times, the mom yelled at me. I had been giving her son extra help after school, along with some other students. We were 6 weeks into the school year, and she hadn't come to back-to-school night or made any attempt to contact me. When she came to pick him up, she had no idea where to go. She'd never been to our school before and hadn't read the after-school group flyer. Instead, she started yelling at other teachers who were waiting out front with their own after-school students. They had no idea who she was or which child she was looking for. She couldn't even ask them where my class was because she didn't know the name of her child's teacher. I walked up with her son as this was happening, and she immediately turned her attention back to me, continuing to chew me out. She said a lot of ridiculous things that day. It was a complete, blatant projection of her own irresponsibility. Story 27. A few years ago, I was having a meeting with a parent about their son's constant behavioral issues, disrupting class, refusing to listen, even picking fights with other kids. I tried to explain what was happening and how we could work together to help him. The parent just shrugged and said, "From 8 to 2, he's your problem, not mine." I honestly didn't know what to say. That was their entire parenting philosophy. If the kid was in school, he was basically a free-range menace, and whatever happened was on us. Meanwhile, the kid was actually pretty bright, smart enough to know he could get away with everything because his parents would never back us up. Story 28. My mother is a retired college English teacher. Helicopter parents would regularly call to inquire about their kids' grades. "Mom, that's confidential per college policy. If you want to learn your child's grade, you'll have to ask him or her." Parent: "But I am paying their tuition." Mom: "It doesn't matter. Your child has a right to privacy. I can and will only discuss grades with them." Parent: "I am calling the dean." Mom: "By all means." Story 29. A few years ago, I had a couple come in to discuss the behavior of a child who kept disrupting class. He would curse, flip off his peers, and make other inappropriate gestures. Eventually, I got fed up and called his parents in. I have no idea what story he told them to make me look like the bad cop, but I was shocked when his father actually called me a freaking Neanderthal for whatever the son claimed I did to him. His mother wasn't much better, calling me a buffoon for my actions. The punishment I gave him stood, but I still question what kind of parents they were to this day. Story 30. A third grader's parents came in with a notarized list of demands. Children in my class must be prohibited from bringing gluten, ever. They said they didn't want their daughter to feel left out because other kids were eating gluten. No, she didn't have celiac. It was just the family's personal choice. I let their daughter choose who she sat next to each day, even though the class had a carefully coordinated seating plan. She was to be exempt from history class because she was too advanced for our class but not advanced enough for the AP, accelerated/gifted class. Long story short, They ended up switching her to a private school before the year ended. Story 31. My friend is a teacher at an elementary school. She called me a few nights ago because a first-grade girl ran out of the school when color time was over. The elderly nurse retrieved her, and they took her to the nurse's office to calm down. That's when things went completely off the rails. The little girl proceeded to scream, "I hate your ugly face, mother effer," and the nurse stomping her feet, ripping her scrubs, and twisting her wrist. She was saying "mother effer" in the style of the Asian guy from The Hangover, and the staff were trying desperately not to laugh. At one point, a teacher snorted, and the little girl yelled, "This isn't funny, mother effer." Finally, they managed to calm her down by letting her color again. Story 32. I used to be a preschool teacher, ages 4 and 5, and we did evaluations every few months. One 4-year-old girl, sweet as could be, could only count to 4. She struggled with other skills too, but counting was by far the biggest challenge. Her parents came in for the evaluation and were delighted that their daughter could count to 4. We had to gently explain that she was actually well behind the other kids. Even the children with genuine learning challenges had surpassed her. She was obviously bright, so we asked what they worked on with her at home. Nothing. They did absolutely nothing, assuming she wouldn't or couldn't start learning until teachers taught her. To their credit, they did start working with her at home afterward. By the beginning of the next year, she was ready to move up. I've never been so proud and disappointed at the same time in a set of parents. Story 33. This might not really count, but when I was a swim instructor, one parent complained that her son wasn't improving in his lessons. It was true that I sometimes had trouble motivating him, but I felt he was doing well. Apparently, she also complained that I wasn't the only one teaching his lessons and that I had several substitutes. That wasn't true. I taught every single lesson. In the next lesson, the kid was doing well again. I even got him to swim short distances without assistance. He was 5 years old and couldn't touch the bottom. The mother didn't seem to agree. She said something like, "He can't just keep going back and forth and kicking the whole time. You do realize that's basically how people swim, right?" They sadly never came back. Story 34. My aunt is a teacher, and she told me about a strange parent encounter from a year or so ago. She was teaching 6th or 7th grade, and there was one student who was severely underperforming. Despite numerous conversations with him, he never worked in class or improved his grades. My aunt had to call his mother to the school to discuss the situation. She tried to explain that she believed he had the capacity to do much better, but simply wasn't applying himself. The mother, however, flat out denied it. She wasn't irrational or crazy, just in complete denial. My aunt even showed her his grades, but the mother ripped the paper apart and insisted it wasn't true. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about. My son is perfect," and then stormed out of the school. Story 35. I was the parent in this story. Well, actually, the uncle backing up the parent. During a parent-teacher meeting, we spent a long time ranting about the enormous amount of homework our nephew was supposedly getting every night. Several hours a night, which we felt was excessive for a 10-year-old. We were seriously considering taking him out of school to homeschool him, since we were basically doing that already. Once the meeting began, the teachers calmly explained the situation. Our kid wasn't getting homework at all. What we thought was hours of nightly homework was actually a stack of worksheets he was supposed to complete in class. The teachers were even letting him take them home as a favor. For context, my nephew was in 4th grade at the time. In 3rd grade, he had almost no homework, but in 4th, he was suddenly buried in it, or so we thought. He would get home around 3 p.m., supposedly working on 5-6 worksheets until 6 or 7, when my brother or I got off work. Then we would help check and tutor him until 9 or 10 p.m. every night for 3 months straight. Parent-teacher night finally gave us a chance to figure out what was going on. My brother had missed previous meetings due to work and other mishaps, so I came along to help explain the homework situation without losing our tempers. We sat around a big table with all of his teachers, frustrated and irritated, ready to demand answers about several hours of nightly homework. Each time we calmed down, a teacher would politely deny ever assigning homework. We would get more upset, thinking our son was being overburdened. This went on until one teacher excused himself and returned with one of the worksheets I had helped him with recently. Yes, the homework we were complaining about, but it wasn't actually homework. Here's how it worked. The school had a policy of no regular homework until around 6th grade. Students would spend the first half of class learning new material and the second half completing worksheets to demonstrate understanding. Teachers were available to help during this time, and students were supposed to finish in class. If they didn't, they could take the worksheets home for completion the next day. Our nephew, however, had been goofing off during class, hardly working on the worksheets at all, then coming home and claiming the time he spent watching TV or playing video games was him completing the worksheets. That's why we thought he was being assigned hours of homework every night. Meanwhile, the teachers assumed he was finishing them in class and occasionally letting him take them home to accommodate him. Once everything was explained, my brother and I confronted the boy. He went pale the moment we said, "We finally got to talk to your teachers tonight." We laid down new rules: no more goofing off in class, do your work independently, and appropriate punishments were applied. His grades suffered a bit initially, but he started doing his own work and submitting it on time. Mostly. Eventually, he completed elementary, middle, and high school, attended a local trade/technical vocational college, and earned a welding certification. Last I heard, he was fielding job offers, living independently, and discovering that women exist, so he doesn't really have time for Uncle Troy anymore. Story 36. She said, "My son doesn't stutter, he's just shy." I was dumbfounded. I've been a speech and language pathologist for a long time, and that is by far the most ridiculous thing a parent has ever said to me. I really had to think carefully to come up with a smooth reply. Story 37. I am not the teacher, but my cousin told us this ridiculous story about what he said to his daughter's teacher. Some backstory. My cousin's daughter is completely spoiled. She's 8 years old and has 4 TVs, her own iPad, a cell phone, a laptop, and every Barbie you can imagine. She's constantly told she's the best and favorite child in front of her 2 older siblings, and she gets whatever she wants. If she asks someone to get her shoes 2 feet away, they do it, or she throws a tantrum worse than anything you've ever seen. This kid is a total nightmare, and I blame my cousin. Honestly, I think she might have mild autism or ADD based on her behavior, but my cousin doesn't believe in that stuff. Even if he did, his princess is perfect. There's no way she could have those conditions. Since she's so used to everything being done her way, she struggles in school because she expects the teacher to accommodate her exactly and expects perfect grades. So the teacher called the parents and said, "Your daughter is having issues in class. You need to work with her." They tried their usual nonsense, which didn't help, so the teacher suggested getting her tested. Here's where it gets ridiculous. My cousin took her to a homeopathic doctor who declared she had a gluten allergy, which supposedly explained why she didn't pay attention. Then they told the teacher she wasn't allowed gluten, but kept sending her to school with sandwiches and other foods that contained gluten. When the teacher called to point out she was still eating gluten, my cousin replied, "Well, bread isn't gluten," and he told this story as if the teacher was the dumb one. Honestly, I feel bad for the kid. She's so messed up, and she probably won't get anywhere in life until she hits rock bottom, which likely won't happen as long as my cousin is around to coddle her. Story 38. My dad is a retired teacher with over 25 years of experience. One story that really sticks out involves a Pakistani family whose parents were visibly upset that their daughter received a single B+ on her report card. They asked my dad to give her enough extra credit assignments to bring it up to an A+. My dad explained that grades in 6th grade don't really make that much of a difference, and that they should be proud she earned the highest marks in the class, or probably the entire grade. The parents didn't understand. Story 39. I once had a student who was this overweight redhead. I swear this kid was the Antichrist. He would come into class screaming at the top of his lungs, constantly get up out of his seat, and start picking fights with other students. He almost punched a kid who was sharpening his pencil because he looked at him funny. He refused to do any work, so he was failing all his classes. One time, he wrote a research paper and left all the blue Wikipedia links in it. I, of course, gave him a 0. The other teachers and I immediately set up a parent-teacher conference. We detailed his behavior and our concerns about his grades. The parent listened to story after story about how her child was basically from hell, and her response was, "Well, I don't want him to be a robot." She didn't care about anything we said. She just didn't want him to sit in class and act like all the other kids. I am so glad I am done with that school. Story 40. I am currently a piano performance major and teach piano part-time. During a trial lesson, one mom said, "I want my son to learn piano, but I don't want to buy a piano. It'll be a waste of money." I explained that she could buy a cheaper electric keyboard. She then added, "But I don't want to waste too much money on this small hobby. I don't want him to become a musician and waste his life away." I sat there, stunned, telling a musician that her life is a waste. Thanks, lady. Story 41. I work at a preschool. In our 2-year-old rooms, we have a rule that kids can't move into the 3-year-old room until they are mostly potty trained. Most of the students are 2, with a few who have just turned 3. There's one boy who is 4. He is not potty trained because, in his mother's words, she doesn't want to force him. He should be in pre-K. Instead, he's in the 2-year-old class for his 3rd year, extremely behind his peers, both educationally and emotionally, with a mother who seems fine letting him fail through no fault of his own. Story 42. Apparently, my little dollop of sunshine with a Napoleon complex told his mom that I called him retarded. I obviously did not, but his mom came up to the school that day with 3 other kids in tow and yelled at me. She was a very large Latina woman with several face piercings and tattoos. She told me, "My son is only allergic to shellfish, so I know for a fact he is not retarded." Later, after he was suspended and failing all his classes, she sent me several messages on Facebook begging me to call her and help them. Story 43. I had a parent who couldn't control her child. The parents were divorced, and the dad would continually buy this kid stuff, while the mom worked 2 jobs and couldn't pay rent due to vandalism the kid committed. He was around 11 or 12. She would take his Xbox, bike, etc., and hide them for bad behavior. The boy would just find them and use them anyway. She didn't have money to hire a sitter and wasn't home enough to enforce rules. I wish I could say this was unique, but in the inner city it becomes the norm. We were honestly lucky the mom took time off work to meet with us. I told her to take the Xbox, bike, etc., and instead of hiding them, go to the pawn shop with the child, sell the items, and buy herself something nice. The funny thing is, I don't think she had the will to do it. She was honestly scared of her child. He left class about 2 weeks later because he and his mom were kicked out of their apartment complex. Story 44. I had a student blatantly cheat in my class. I gave him a 0, and his mom came in to chat. Before even knowing what had happened, she said, "My son would never cheat, and he certainly would never lie to me and has never lied to me." I showed her hard proof that he had cheated, and she still defended him. It was sad. Then there was another parent who called my performance as an educator piss poor because her daughter got an F in my course. I explained that her daughter hadn't turned in any assignments and that I would have given credit if she had. The mother still insisted it was my fault. She then proceeded to go to every administrator and tell her story about why I am a terrible teacher. Story 45. Although I am not a teacher, my mom and stepdad both work at a university. Back in high school, I got assigned to a group project with a kid I was friendly with. The day before the project was due, I looked at the document and realized nothing had been completed. I called his house and his parents picked up. I had heard they were very overprotective, so I tried to be super polite and said, "Could you please remind child to work on the project?" Well, they had none of that. The kid's father proceeded to scream at me, calling me lazy and other insults. My mom, who was nearby, was watching. The father then asked to speak to my dad, and I explained, "My parents are divorced, but my mother is here." At that point, he called me a motherfucking liar. My mom ripped the phone out of my hand and began tearing him a new one. Then, the most asinine thing ever came out of his mouth. "You can't talk to me like this. I am a doctor." My mom, who was also a doctor, sarcastically replied, "Yeah? What kind?" He proudly proclaimed, "I am an oncologist at university." By this point, my mom had put the phone on speaker, ran over to me with a devious look in her eyes, and asked for his last name. He then insulted her and insisted he would beat the beckett out of her if he saw her in person because she was so disrespectful. My mom calmly said, "Well, Dr. Last Name. My name is Dr. Mom's name, and I am the head oncologist at university." My stepdad added, "I am Dr. Stepdad's name, head of HR at university." His voice must have jumped 2 octaves. He immediately recognized who they were. He just sat there silently and muttered, "Oh." My mom then said, "At work you will report directly to my husband's office. I am going to charge you with harassment," and hung up. I finished the project on my own, and the kid ended up moving away a couple of months later after they fired his dad. Story 46. My wife is a 5th grade teacher, and one family she had taught over the years had 3 kids, each more obnoxious than the last. The youngest was finally in 5th grade, and every teacher was relieved they didn't have to deal with this family anymore. They also had a grandfather who came to lunch with this youngest kid every single day. The granddad was a constant disruption and just generally rude to the entire staff. Fast forward to the end of the year. After the graduation ceremony, my wife was hugging students and chatting with parents, saying her goodbyes for the summer. She noticed the granddad off to the side, sizing her up. He walked over, yanked her arm while she was in mid-conversation with other parents, and yelled, pointing right in her face, "I know you don't like my grandson, and that's why he got a C, but I am giving you an F." Then he turned and walked off with the rest of the family. Story 47. My old math teacher taught at about 10 different schools throughout his long career. He told us a story about a kid who was an absolute terror in class, so he spoke to the boy's father to inform him. Apparently, the son had a history of being difficult, not just with teachers, but with his own parents as well. The father gave my teacher permission to physically discipline his son, a practice that in early 1990s Australia, teachers could get away with. One day, before class, my teacher took the boy into a storage room and slapped him a few times. The kid immediately threatened to tell his father, claiming my teacher was in trouble. My teacher calmly told him, "Your father told me to do this to straighten you out." The boy went white and after that actually behaved in class. Story 48. My cousin is a middle school teacher. There's been a growing problem at the school where some parents buy teacher's edition textbooks and have their kids memorize the answers at home so they can pass all the tests and sometimes even do their homework for them. The teachers started to suspect this was happening, so they began scrambling the order of questions and answers on tests. Surprisingly, many of the straight-A students started failing. When my cousin had to call parents in to discuss the issue, one parent literally said, "You don't understand. It's more dishonorable to have bad grades than to be caught cheating." They genuinely do not understand how this is setting their children up for failure after graduation. Story 49. My mom is a 1st grade teacher. She once received an email from a parent telling her to put nothing less than an A on his son's report card because he didn't want it to hinder his son's chances of getting into Harvard. My mom promptly responded that the child was below average and would receive the grade he had earned. But really, 1st grade? Those letter grades at that age mean almost nothing. It's worth noting that she teaches in a very affluent town, and the father was a surgeon at a local hospital who genuinely thought his kid was far better than anyone else's. Story 50. I come from a family of teachers and could probably come up with a handful of good stories. The one that sticks out the most is from my mom, who was a PE and health teacher at a very small school in a local farming town. She also coached girls softball in the fall and track in the spring. One of the more affluent mothers in the community approached my mom at a track meet and said that the kids didn't have enough fun activities during PE. She suggested that my mom talk to school officials about horse riding. My mom assumed she meant taking a field trip somewhere nearby. Maybe not likely, but not completely out of the realm of possibility either. Turns out, what the lady was really suggesting was a full stable and an equestrian range/field, complete with horses. Her reasoning, her daughter really enjoyed riding horses, so it was totally reasonable to expect the school district to provide this. My mom excused herself pretty quickly and got back to the track meet. Story 51. A parent of a child with behavior problems sent him to school with junk for breakfast every day. Fast food, Starbucks, cupcakes, you name it. We spent a lot of time trying to get her to even feed him breakfast in the first place, because he refused to eat what was provided at school and was an absolute nightmare on an empty stomach. I am talking hide under the desk screaming all day levels of difficulty. For a while, we didn't say anything, because at least he was on time and eating. But then all the other students who previously had no problem with the milk, cereal, and fruit provided at school started noticing him eating his delicious pancakes or whatever he had that day. It turned into a full-blown kindergarten hunger strike, and it was miserable. When we asked the mother to please make an effort to feed him before arriving at school, she said she didn't have time unless we wanted him to be late every day, another problem that took forever to resolve. We reminded her that the school provided a perfectly healthy breakfast for free and suggested she at least try to convince him to eat what everyone else got. He would literally do whatever she asked. It just required sitting with him for 10 minutes. Her response? I don't want him eating that sugary processed crap. So, he took his McDonald's breakfast with an aide in the classroom for the rest of the year. Story 52. I taught 4th grade next to a military base, so my class list was always in pencil. Midway through the year, I got a Dutch girl who didn't speak a word of English. Her dad dropped her off in my classroom after enrolling her and told me not to make any exceptions. She was expected to learn English on her own. However, he insisted she be exempt from math because she had never had a math class before. He was an engineer in the Army. I taught her math anyway. She initially had very limited exposure to the subject, but by the last semester, she was on the honor roll, including in math. Story 53. I was a high school teacher in the UK for several years. At parents' evenings, you'd meet all kinds of parents, from every walk of life. One evening, I was sitting near a fellow English teacher when the parents of a student, let's call him Matt, came in. Matt was a unique kid. A late transfer, not many friends, had a horrendous, condescending attitude toward other students and constantly complained that no one was good enough to work with him. His parents were usually something else. Matt's mother sat down and immediately said, "Once this meeting is done, I would like to make a formal complaint to your line manager and the head teacher." Most teachers would feel their blood run cold, but my colleague calmly replied, "Well, hopefully it won't come to that. I am sorry you're upset. What seems to be the problem?" Her response: I refuse to have my son be made to read occult texts that encourage devil worship in class. She slammed down the Year 7 syllabus text, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, as evidence. My colleague patiently explained that the national curriculum had pre-approved the book, and along with 99% of the country, saw no problem with it. But she had come prepared. "I don't care. He's not reading it. I demand he be given something of more literary worth. I've checked the national curriculum guidelines. Matthew will study something respectable. I want you to teach him Macbeth separately, which is also on the approved reading list." What followed was about 2 minutes, though it felt like 10. My colleague methodically listed all the occult references in Macbeth, the witches, the ghosts, and the numerous murders, probably just for effect, right in front of Matt's mother. To her credit, she sat silently until he was done. Then she mumbled something about still not wanting Harry Potter and left. Story 54. This one's kind of sad. I had a girl around 9 years old with severe behavioral problems. She struggled with even simple tasks and would frequently fly off the handle. Much of this stemmed from a lot of trauma she had experienced in her short life. One day, she was trying to break down the office door to get to some other students who had locked themselves inside for their own protection. Her mother arrived and just watched for a while before saying, "She's behaving like this because the upstairs neighbors put a chip in her neck to track her, and it's feeding back through her ears. That's why she's always grumpy." Long story short, the girl went to live with relatives while her mother went into a psychiatric ward. After a few months, her mother returned and has been caring for her daughter. It was a tough period, but they seem to be getting back on track now. I am constantly amazed by the resilience of kids. Sure, this girl was acting out, but knowing all she's had to endure, it's remarkable that she is functioning as well as she is at all. Story 55. So, as a teacher, you meet all kinds of parents, but a few emails and encounters really stick with you. One mom emailed after the school year ended, insisting her child wasn't tardy on a specific day, even though the attendance records said otherwise. Another mom wrote in saying her son couldn't finish an in-class journal because he didn't have a pencil and was too afraid to ask me for one. Meanwhile, she was also asking me to accept late homework. The irony was unreal. And then there was the dad who yelled at me during parent-teacher conferences, claiming I was un-American because I don't teach kids that all Muslims are the enemy. Yep, that actually happened. Some days, being a teacher is exhausting, but it's also never boring. Story 56. I was a daycare teacher, and this happened during the summer. We had two siblings attending whose files clearly marked them as lactose intolerant. We take every allergy very seriously, providing safe snacks and inspecting every box to ensure the kids can eat it. We also offer alternative snacks just in case. This went on for about a week until I noticed one of the kids drinking milk straight from a carton. I went to my supervisor and we asked the child where she got the milk. Being little, she wasn't entirely sure but thought it came from her lunchbox. Now all of us were confused, the child, my supervisor, and me, because she insisted she drinks milk all the time. We pulled out her file and tried calling her mom, but couldn't reach her. We agreed to monitor the child until her mom picked her up. Luckily, she was fine, no tummy aches, so we cautiously breathed a sigh of relief. It turns out the kids aren't lactose intolerant at all, nor are they vegan. Their mom had just read somewhere that regular milk makes you smell bad, so she only gives them organic milk. It was the end of my shift, so I left and laughed all the way home. Story 57. I had a parent schedule a conference with my supervisor because her child was failing my class. She wanted to know why and what I could or should be doing to help him. I told her, well, I would love to help him out, but he actually has to show up to class. Her reply, well, what are you going to do to make sure he goes to your class? Another parent said, I pay your salary. My child shouldn't be failing. What do you even do all day? This student also never goes to class. As soon as he gets off the bus, he hops into a car with his friends and disappears somewhere. And then there was this gem. Sorry about the little troublemaker. She's nothing but a waste like her father. I had called for the parent-teacher conference because the student refused to do any work. Her justification? I don't have to do what you say because my mom makes 10 times more than you do. Story 58. I teach in China at a private school where many of the parents are extremely wealthy. We're talking multiple houses, servants, sports cars. One dad had at least 3 Porsches, red, blue, and yellow. He'd just pick whichever one he felt like driving that day. Many of the children are spoiled with the latest iPhones, iPads, cameras, and more. I've even seen kids come to school with a servant carrying their school bag for them. At the school gate, the servant, often an older woman, would hand the bag over, and the child would then walk inside. I've seen these kids hit their servants, and the servants visibly flinch. One little girl was used to giving orders, just like at home. In class, she tried to boss the other kids around, which unsurprisingly didn't make her many friends, especially since many of the other kids were rich and used to getting what they wanted. After a few days, the other children refused to play or talk with her. Her mother came to the school and told the principal that if he didn't make the other children play with her daughter, she would have those children removed. Story 59. I teach 2nd grade in a low-income area, and this year I had a student with severe ADHD. He's super smart, but he just can't sit still, focus, or stay quiet. He's sweet, but when redirected, he can get very disrespectful and disrupt the class. After a couple of weeks of nonstop chaos, he said something really inappropriate to another student, so he was removed from class for the day. Naturally, his mom had to come in for a meeting. Here's the kicker. She showed up demanding our principal be present, claiming she had no idea why he was removed and that I never contacted her about his behavior. After a half hour of patiently explaining why her son's actions were inappropriate, she told us she just felt like we were punishing him because he had to stay home that day. Some days, teaching is exhausting, but honestly, it's never boring. Story 60. My favorite type of parent was the one who instills their own fear of water into their children. Saying Laura doesn't like putting her face in the water will often become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because her mother is scared, Laura will start being scared too, even if she's never had an issue before. It's really a shame. The best parent of all time was one I only dealt with once because I was covering a lesson. A really shy girl, Emily, shows up with her mom. My notes from the usual instructor said that if Emily is in the water for more than 10 minutes of the half-hour class, she's doing well. The first thing the mom says is, Emily does not want a male instructor, so right away I am being insulted because of my gender. Nice way to start the day. Anyway, I managed to convince her that I am not going to harm her daughter, and I get told a long list of things Emily doesn't like doing. Finally, into the water, and lo and behold, Emily is terrified. Not her fault. Her mother has essentially told her to be scared. Clearly, the usual teacher was too intimidated to stand up to the mom and push Emily to try anything, so she couldn't do any meaningful teaching. A bit of gentle force dunking later, my favorite teaching practice, and within half an hour, Emily was putting her face in the water, swimming and floating on her back all by herself. Her mom couldn't believe it and asked if I could teach her every week. Moral of the story, sometimes the parents are the real problem. Story 61. My brother is 25 and going into his third year as a high school English teacher. We ended up with opposite traits, so while we don't look anything alike at first glance, we both turned out fairly decent looking. He dresses sharp, hits the gym, and honestly, the guy looks good. I say we look nothing alike because of this. Once, I was at a fundraiser for his school, chatting with the parent of one of his students. The mom just assumed I was a student. I've got a baby face, and started asking if I knew the tall, dark, and handsome English teacher. She went on about how if she were younger, she'd be all over that, while a few nearby high school girls either rolled their eyes or giggled in agreement. Since I knew my brother was the only new teacher there, I kept a deadpan expression, nodded, and made my escape. When I told him about it later, he had no idea who the mom was, since I didn't catch her name. But honestly, I worry for him. He's already had to fail quite a few students, and I am afraid that one of them might try to get back at him with a false accusation. Story 62. Not a teacher, but this is about dealing with annoying parents of college kids. My husband and I were selling our contract for our apartment. Basically, we would advertise and show the place, then refer interested prospects to management. One night, the college-age son texted me around midnight, asking to see the apartment first thing in the morning. Now, I am a mom of a 2-year-old and a student myself, so I was asleep and didn't see the text until morning. I ended up waking to my phone ringing, which I ignored, who calls me at 6:30 a.m., and went about my day. About an hour later, I noticed the kid's text, so I sent him times he could come by and info about the place. He said thanks. Not even 5 minutes later, I got a call from the same number that woke me. I have a rule never to answer unknown numbers. If it's important, they can leave a message. I ignored the call and listened to the voicemail. It was the kid's mom yelling about how disrespectful and rude it was to ignore her son, accusing me of not wanting him as a tenant. I texted her back politely. I am sorry, ma'am. Your son texted me in the middle of the night and I didn't see it until morning. I've already sent him times he can see the place and info about management. She replied, Oh, okay. Why couldn't you answer him last night? I said, well, I have a 2-year-old and sleep is precious. If your son had contacted me at a reasonable hour, I would have answered. Then she went on about needing to find a place for him and his sister. The college has strict housing rules, so siblings couldn't live together in approved housing. How no one wanted to rent to them, and how difficult it had been. I thought, okay, lady, I don't care about the sob story. Just come see the place, or don't. A little while later, she texts me saying her kids are out of town until the end of the month, and that we need to save the apartment for them. I was frustrated, but politely explained that my husband and I had already moved out and needed to sell the contract right away. She then asked if her cousin or another relative could come see it. At this point, it was becoming too much of a hassle. I told her that would be fine if someone else came by. It didn't matter to me. She then sent me the cousin's number and said, you need to call him and let him know when to come by. I said, no. If you want to see the place, or if you want him to come by, he needs to take the initiative to call me. I am not taking time out of my day, my daughter, or my schooling to contact potential buyers. If you want it, he needs to call me." She was taken aback, but agreed. I heard nothing for a few days and showed the place to other interested people. It went great. A few days later, she called again at 6:30 a.m. I ignored it and texted her back. She wanted to know if I had contacted the cousin. I said no. It wasn't my job, and he hadn't contacted me. Later that day, she said the cousin would text me to schedule a time. He never did. The next day, management informed me they had found a new tenant, so we no longer needed to show the place. Yay! Later that day, the mom called again. I answered and listened to her complain that I hadn't contacted the cousin and how unfair it was. I calmly told her management had signed new tenants and the place was no longer available. She yelled, "What? We didn't even get to see it. I will sue. That's lying and wrong." I finally said, "Sorry, ma'am. I am just a renter who needed to sell her contract. It's not up to me who gets the apartment. It's up to the owner and management company. And a little advice, your grown adult children will go farther in life if you don't come and berate people who are just doing their jobs. Now leave me alone, or I will report your number for harassment and block you. Have a nice day." It felt amazing not having that helicopter mom bugging me anymore. She was more controlling than I am with my 2-year-old. Sometimes parents just need to loosen the reins. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.